There are moments when the world reveals its true face. For Naomi Caldwell, that moment came on a Thursday afternoon in late May, on the quiet suburban street where she had lived for 3 years, when a police officer wrapped his arm around her throat and tried to strangle her. The afternoon sun beat down on Maplewood Drive with its scorching heat. Naomi's red sedan was technically Michael's red sedan, but he had died 2 days earlier. It gleamed as she pulled into her usual parking spot 3 houses down from her mother's house. She had just finished surveillance duty. She had spent 8 hours watching a warehouse suspected of human trafficking activities. Her eyes were tired. All she wanted was her mother's sweet tea. She needed to rest. Naomi Caldwell was 35 years old and worked as a senior special agent for Homeland Security Investigations. She had spent 8 years at HSI, focusing on international crime syndicates, human trafficking, and border security. Before that, she had worked on ICE investigations for 4 years, building the kind of cases that earned her a transfer to a more specialized division. Naomi's work history was quite impressive. She was good at her job, meticulous, patient, an agent who could spend weeks building a single case, following leads others might overlook. Her superiors trusted her. The car was one of the few physical things left to her by her late husband, Michael. He had died in a highway accident 2 years earlier. She had kept the car because selling it felt like erasing him. The registration was now in her name, transferred according to standard DMV procedures after her husband's death. The car radio played soft music. As she reached for her phone to text Laya that she had arrived, red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. The patrol car appeared so suddenly that Naomi's first thought was that something had happened to her mother. But the patrol car's lights were focused on her, and as she watched in the side mirror, a police officer appeared with his hand on his service weapon. Naomi's training kicked in immediately. She placed both hands on the steering wheel, visibly and non-threateningly. She hadn't yet produced her ID. She avoided sudden movements. She knew what could happen to her. The police officer approached the driver's side window with an aggressive expression on his face. He was a man in his mid-30s with fair skin. His name was Sloan. "Get out of the car now," he shouted, his voice unnecessarily loud. Several neighbors looked up from their porches. Mrs. Washington, 3 doors down. The Rodriguez family standing on their lawn. Camila Reyes, who drove for Uber and Lyft, stood by her car, phone in hand. They knew something was wrong. Naomi kept her voice calm and clear. "Officer, I'll get my license and registration. I'll move slowly and carefully," she said. Her hand reached for the bag on the passenger seat. The driver's door swung open violently. Sloan's face appeared, flushed and contorted with barely suppressed anger. "This vehicle has been reported stolen," he growled. "Get out now," he ordered. Naomi could have incapacitated him right there and then if she had wanted to. Her training allowed her to do so, but she chose to remain calm. Naomi's mind was racing. Stolen? Impossible. The car was registered in her name. She had the license. She had renewed the registration last month. "There must be a mistake. There must be an error in your system," she said. "This car belonged to my late husband. It's properly registered in my name. I'll show you my documents." "Shut up," Sloan said, grabbing her wrist and pressing his fingers into her skin so hard they turned purple. "I said get out," he said, making physical contact. Before Naomi could fully comply, he yanked her out of the seat. With this movement, Naomi stumbled out of the car. Her bag fell to the ground, and its contents spilled onto the sidewalk. She tried to keep her balance, but Sloan didn't give her that chance. He pinned her against the hood of his own car. The metal was still hot from driving, and as Sloan twisted Naomi's arm behind her with unnecessary force, the metal pressed against Naomi's cheek. Naomi's HSI training included extensive physical confrontation scenarios, but this wasn't training. This was real, unfolding too quickly, and wrong in every way. Naomi considered every possible scenario. "Stop resisting," Sloan yelled. "I'm not resisting," Naomi said. "Officer, let me show you my ID," she tried to say. The pressure on her arm increased. Then suddenly, horribly, an arm tightened around her throat. Naomi's free hand instinctively went to her throat, trying to make room to breathe. Her fingers clawed at Sloan's forearm, but Sloan had the position and the advantage. Naomi's vision began to blur. Across the street, Camila Reyes froze for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone, turned on the camera, her hands shaking but steady enough to capture what was happening. Naomi's vision was fading fast. As her oxygen-deprived brain struggled to function, the world began to tilt and spin. She could hear sounds. She had worked as a federal agent for 8 years. She had made dozens of arrests. She had received hundreds of hours of training. And Naomi was going to die on a suburban street because a police officer mistook her for a car thief. To Naomi, this situation was absurd. She suddenly began to question her life. Naomi forced the words stuck in her throat out with her last ounce of strength. "My ID," she gasped. Her vision was about to go completely dark. As Sloan's breath blew warm into her ear, he grumbled, "Nice try, lady. I've heard all the scams in the book." Sloan was making the biggest mistake of his life, and there would be no turning back. The siren grew louder. Naomi's legs began to tremble, her consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. Her last coherent thought was probably her mother, Laya, watching her daughter being killed by the police from her porch 3 houses away. It would be a huge trauma. Officer June Park's patrol car screeched to a halt behind Sloan's. She was 26, Korean-American, and had graduated from the academy just 11 months ago. This should have been a routine backup call, but what she saw froze her blood. For a moment she couldn't react to what she saw. Sloan had strangled a woman. She appeared to be unconscious, her body limp, one hand still weakly raised to her throat. People around her were screaming. Many were recording with their phones. And Sloan seemed completely unaware of the disaster unfolding around him. When June jumped out of her car, her body camera was already recording. "What are you doing?" she yelled, her hand instinctively moving to make sure her camera was recording everything. "Let her go," she warned her colleague. She knew the intervention was wrong. Sloan barely looked at his colleague. "Stolen vehicle suspect." "Resisting," he replied. "He's not moving," June said. "He's unconscious," she shouted. The growing crowd drew closer. Camilla's phone had recorded everything. June's academy training was comprehensive on the use of force policies. What she was witnessing was not protocol. "Sloan, drop him now." June approached, her hand going to her gun, not to draw it, but to assert her authority. "That's an order. Drop him now," she commanded. The pressure on Naomi's throat suddenly eased slightly. Air filled Naomi's lungs with a painful, wheezing breath. Her consciousness returned like a physical blow. Years of training and survival instinct kicked in. Naomi assessed this moment of confusion with her free hand. She opened her jacket. The gold badge on her belt reflected the afternoon sunlight. Homeland Security Investigations. The Federal Eagle seal was clearly visible, the badge number crisp and distinct. June Park's breath caught in her throat. She had studied federal identification documents extensively during her academy training. Recognizing federal badges was standard procedure for local law enforcement. HSI was distinctive. The eagle, the seal, the special gold color. It was impossible to convincingly counterfeit. The body camera hummed softly, recording everything. "Oh my God," June whispered, then spoke louder, with an authority she didn't know she possessed. "Sloan, this is HSI, Homeland Security. Let him go now," she said. The change in Sloan's expression was visible even from where June stood. The aggressive certainty on his face vanished, replaced by something like dawning horror. "This is fake," he muttered. "It has to be fake. No one—" June had already reached for her radio. "Central, Unit 247, send a supervisor to Maplewood Drive immediately. There's an issue with a federal agent. I repeat, federal agent," she announced. Naomi's legs were shaking, but she was trying to stay on her feet with sheer willpower. Her throat burned with every breath, but she was alive, and she was furious. She would do everything in her power to make sure those responsible paid the heaviest price. The radio crackled. A sergeant's voice cut through the static. "All units, immediately, release the suspect. I repeat, release him and stand down," he ordered. Sloan's arms finally fell. Naomi staggered forward and steadied herself by grabbing onto her car. Her fingers found her throat and gently probed the tender flesh as she tried to control her breathing. The anger building inside her was cold and sharp. With careful movements, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her ID wallet. When the leather case opened, her official ID card appeared next to her badge. The photo matched her face. The signature matched her name. Everything was correct. He raised June Park's body camera to ensure every detail was captured. "Special Agent Naomi Caldwell," he said. "Homeland Security Investigations. Badge number 4729. And this man just committed aggravated assault on a federal officer. He made sure everything was recorded. He would use this as evidence later." June's body camera captured Sloan's face at that moment. Sloan now understood his career was over. "I didn't know," Sloan began. "I told you," Naomi cut him off in an icy tone. "I told you to check my ID. I told you this car is registered to me. I told you I'm a federal law enforcement officer. And you tried to strangle me in front of witnesses on a public street, almost killing me," she replied. A sergeant's car pulled up. Sergeant Dale Morrison got out, a 20-year veteran who had seen enough to recognize disaster when he saw it. He surveyed the scene. "Agent Caldwell," Morrison said carefully. "I'm Sergeant Morrison. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" he asked. He was aware of the situation and was trying to calm things down, but he knew his efforts were futile. Naomi put her hand to her throat. "These injuries need to be medically documented. Also, every camera, every recording, and every witness statement must be preserved as evidence, she said. Of course. I'm calling an ambulance, said Morrison. After giving my initial statement, I'll go to the emergency room myself, she said. Naomi's professional training had kicked in, suppressing shock and pain. Officer Park, you need to secure your body camera recordings immediately. No one but federal investigators should touch it, she warned. June nodded. Yes, sir. It's already flagged among the evidence in the system, she said. Naomi turned to Camilla, who was still recording. Ma'am, what is your name? She asked. Camilla Reyes, Camilla replied. Miss Reyes, the video you just recorded is federal evidence in a civil rights investigation. I want you to upload it to a secure cloud immediately, and send me the link. Do not delete the original from your phone, Naomi said, pulling out a business card. My contact information, she said, handing the card to Camilla. Camilla took the card with trembling hands. I recorded everything, she said. Thank you, she said. Turning to Naomi and Morrison. Sergeant, I am officially informing you that Officer Sloan is currently under federal investigation for assault on a federal officer, violation of civil rights under the law, and attempted murder. I want to take him into custody, now. There was no turning back. Morrison looked at Sloan, who stood frozen, unable to believe his world had ended. Officer Sloan, you are immediately suspended pending the outcome of the investigation. Surrender your weapon and badge, he ordered. But he didn't tell me. Sloan's protests ended with Morrison's hardening expression. Weapon, badge, now, Morrison said. As Sloan's service weapon and identification were confiscated, Naomi saw her mother finally arrive, rushing from her home. Naomi Caldwell was 68 years old, a retired school counselor who had spent 40 years in the Atlanta public school system. She had seen a lot in those decades. Baby? Naomi's voice was calm, but her eyes were tearful. Are you hurt? She asked. I'm fine, Mom, Naomi said. Her voice trembled slightly as she lied. She wasn't fine. Her throat burned, her head throbbed, and she could still feel Sloan's arm squeezing her windpipe. More patrol cars were arriving. A lieutenant, a captain, someone from the police union. The corporate protection mechanism was kicking in, ready to protect its own, but they would be floundering in vain. Naomi would not back down from her case under any circumstances. Naomi pulled out her phone and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. Agent Morrison, HSI Atlanta Field Office. Sir, this is Caldwell. I need to report an incident. Local police attacked me during a traffic stop. I have injuries, multiple witnesses, and body camera footage. I need a full investigation team deployed immediately, she said. There was a brief pause. Then her supervisor's stern professional voice came through. Are you safe right now? He asked. Yes, sir. The situation is under control, but I need federal intervention before the local police start destroying evidence, she said. Understood. I'm putting a team together. Don't go anywhere until they arrive. Naomi, are you really okay? He asked once more. Naomi looked around and said, I will be, once I'm sure this will never happen again. As the sun set over Maplewood Drive, painting the suburban street orange and gold, Naomi Caldwell stood beside her car. Officer Trent Sloan thought he had arrested a car thief. In fact, he had made the biggest mistake of his life, and Naomi Caldwell was going to make sure he fully understood just how big that mistake was. The emergency room at Grady Memorial Hospital was quite busy on Thursday evening, but Naomi's federal ID card and visible injuries moved her to the front of the line. Dr. Elena Martinez, in her mid-40s, was an experienced emergency room doctor who had seen enough cases to recognize police brutality immediately. She noticed the bruises on Naomi's throat. You're lucky, Dr. Martinez said, photographing the injuries from different angles. If you'd been 30 seconds later, you would have lost consciousness permanently. Brain damage or death, she said. I know, she said. Naomi's voice was still hoarse, each word irritating her damaged throat. That's why everything needs to be documented. Every bruise, every mark, every measurement. Dr. Martinez shook his head firmly. These are admissible in court. I've testified before. I'll testify again if necessary, he told Naomi, offering his support. While the doctor worked, Naomi's phone kept ringing. 2 investigators were on their way to Maplewood Drive to secure the scene and collect evidence. The FBI Civil Rights Division had been notified. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Office was also being notified. This incident will cause a huge stir, Morrison said on the phone. An attack on a federal officer during a traffic stop recorded by multiple cameras in a residential area. The media will go crazy, he said. Good, Naomi replied. Let them go crazy. Because I guarantee Sloan didn't do this for the first time. I want to know how many more there are, she said. While Dr. Martinez filled out paperwork, Naomi, sitting in the emergency room, pulled out her laptop. Despite being injured and traumatized, her investigative instincts kicked in. she accessed the databases of authorized federal law enforcement agencies and began searching. Officer Trent Sloan, Atlanta Police Department, badge number 3847. 15 years on the force. His complaint history was staggering. Over 8 years, 23 official complaints had been filed against Sloan. 19 involved Black or Latino civilians. 15 involved allegations of excessive force. 7 involved traffic stops that resulted in vehicles being towed. And each had been dismissed by internal affairs, with the same conclusion. The officer acted within departmental policy. This was an outright lie. Someone was covering for him. But what caught Naomi's attention were the towing cases. She cross-referenced the complaint dates with the towing records of the city's contracted towing companies. One name kept popping up: Dixon Towing and Recovery. Naomi followed the clues. Dixon Towing had a near monopoly on towing operations initiated by the police in certain neighborhoods. All of these neighborhoods were predominantly Black and Latino. They were all areas Sloan frequently patrolled. The impound fees were astronomical, $500 to $800 per vehicle, with daily storage fees that could double or triple the cost within a week. Then he examined the financial records. The company's owner, Ty Dixon, had made significant campaign donations to local politicians. These included donations to the current district attorney, who oversaw the police department's budget, and 2 city council members. They had formed their own organization. The situation was becoming increasingly clear. Sloan was conducting fake vehicle stops. The cars were being towed by Dixon's company. Working-class families, often living paycheck to paycheck, couldn't afford these exorbitant fees. Dixon kept the vehicles and sold them at auction, and everyone in the system, except the victims, got their cut. It was a scam. Plain and simple. Naomi had fallen into this scam because she was using a car registered in her late husband's name. The phone rang. The number was from the Atlanta Police Department. Special Agent Caldwell, this is Captain Robert Chen. I'm calling to discuss this afternoon's incident, he said. Naomi's voice was ice cold. The incident where one of your officers assaulted a federal agent during a traffic stop? She asked pointedly. There seems to be some confusion about the circumstances of the incident, said Robert Chen. There's no confusion, Captain. Your officer choked me for no reason, ignored me when I said I was a federal law enforcement officer, and nearly killed me in front of numerous witnesses. All of this is on body cameras and civilian recordings. Now the only question is, how many of your officers were involved in the same criminal activity? He said. There was silence on the other end. Then cautiously, that's a serious accusation, he said, and I have serious evidence. Talk about Officer Sloan's quota system. How many vehicles does he have to impound per month? How much does Dixon Towing pay the department for the exclusive contract? He asked pointedly. Again, there was silence. Captain Chen was clearly flustered. I don't know what you're talking about. He tried to brush it off, but it was futile. Naomi had figured out the system. Then either you're lying or you're incompetent. Either way, federal investigators will start looking into every file in your department. I suggest you start cooperating before you and Sloan face charges, she said. She hung up and immediately forwarded all her preliminary research to Agent Morrison under the heading Pattern Evidence. I request a full financial investigation into Dixon Towing and APD's seizure practices. The next morning, Naomi sat in the conference room of the HSI Atlanta field office with the federal task force assembled overnight, FBI Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice attorneys, IRS Criminal Investigation, and their own HSI team, ready to follow the evidence wherever it led. Agent Morrison opened the briefing. Agent Caldwell was assaulted during a fabricated traffic stop by Officer Trent Sloan of the Atlanta Police Department. Medical records confirm the use of life-threatening force. Multiple records exist. The officer claimed Agent Caldwell's vehicle was stolen, despite it being properly registered. Preliminary investigation suggests this may be part of a larger pattern of civil rights violations and financial crimes, he said. FBI agent Sandra Williams prepared a presentation. We reviewed Sloan's arrest records for the past 5 years. He averages 3.2 vehicle seizures per week. 92% of these involve Black or Latino drivers. 87% of the impounded vehicles go to Dixon Towing. And here's the interesting part. Dixon Towing's revenue increased by 43% during the same period, and this increase occurred despite the company operating in an area where vehicle ownership was declining. They're manufacturing impoundments, Naomi said, her damaged voice making the words sound even more ominous. Sloan and probably other officers are pulling people over with excuses, claiming their vehicles are stolen or suspicious, and impounding them to Dixon. The owners can't afford the fees, Dixon keeps the cars, and everyone but the victims profits. IRS Auditor Marcus Webb leaned forward. We looked at Dixon's tax returns. He reported income consistent with legitimate towing operations. But his lifestyle doesn't match that. 3 properties in his name, luxury vehicles, private school tuition for his children. Someone is secretly paying him, he said. Political donations, said Naomi. Dixon makes significant donations to local officials, including the district attorney, who should be prosecuting police misconduct. I bet these donations are only a fraction of what he's actually paying. Justice Department Attorney Patricia Gomez took notes. This could be RICO. If we can prove it's an organized crime syndicate, police making bogus stops, the tow company profiting, politicians protecting the system, we could bring federal racketeering charges, she said. Do it, Morrison said. But first we need more evidence, more victims, more documents. Agent Caldwell, you're on medical leave. Effective immediately, sir. With all due respect, I am the best person to handle this case, he replied. You're also a victim. The defense will claim bias. Leave the investigation to the rest of the team. Focus on your own case against Sloan and on your recovery. This is an order, Naomi. Take care of yourself. We'll handle it, he said. Naomi wanted to protest, but just then her throat clenched painfully, reminding her that 24 hours ago she had nearly died. But I want daily briefings, she said. You'll get them, Morrison replied. That afternoon, Naomi was at her mother's house, icing her bruised throat, when the doorbell rang. Laya opened the door, then called up the stairs. Honey, there's a police officer here who wants to see you. Her name is June Park. Naomi carefully descended the stairs. Officer Park stood at the door in plain clothes, looking tense but determined. Agent Caldwell, can we talk? Off the record? She asked. They sat in Laya's kitchen. The elderly woman made sweet tea without being asked, then diplomatically left them alone. I can't sleep, June said quietly. Every time I close my eyes I see him choking you, and I keep thinking, what if I hadn't come? What if I'd been 2 minutes late? You came, Naomi said, and your body camera recorded everything. That's important. This isn't the first time I've seen him do something like this. Not exactly the same, but aggressive, unnecessary. He targets people based on their appearance. June's hands gripped the teacup tightly. I'm new. I graduated from the academy 11 months ago, and everyone says you don't question senior officers. You don't break the blue wall. But what happened to you? That crossed a line. Tell me about the quota system, Naomi said. June's eyes widened. How? She said. I'm a federal inspector. It's my job. Talk to me, Officer Park. How does it work? She asked. The story came out in a flash. Monthly arrest, citation, and seizure quotas. The pressure from Sergeant Mara Kessler, who ran the patrol division like a profit center. Officers who consistently met their targets received better shifts, better evaluations, and faster promotions. Those who failed to meet their targets were condemned to night patrol duty in the worst neighborhoods with the oldest equipment. Sloan always met his targets, said June. He exceeded his quota every month, and he was protected. Kessler liked him. He called him a cash cow. Some of us knew he was cutting corners, making up probable causes, but no one said anything because, she continued. Because speaking up would ruin his career, Naomi said. Yes, June said, looking unhappy. Naomi studied the young officer. She saw genuine regret. I can't make this easy for you, Officer Park. You'll have to make a choice. Stay silent and be part of the problem, or speak up and face the consequences. I know, said June, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. This has copies of internal emails about the quota system. Kessler's instructions, performance evaluations, specifying the number of TOWs, and the contract between the city and Dixon Towing. The contract that tied payment to volume and created a financial incentive for more TOWs. Naomi took the drive carefully. This is evidence in a federal investigation. Do you understand that by giving this to me, you could potentially end your law enforcement career? She asked. I understand, but I also understand that if I don't do this, I'll be just as guilty as Sloan. Maybe even more because I know better and chose to stay silent, she said. After June left, Naomi plugged in the USB drive. The files were damning. Email chains discussing monthly performance targets between Sergeant Kessler and patrol officers. Spreadsheets tracking individual officers' impound counts. And most damning of all, a contract amendment between the city and Dixon Towing, including performance bonuses tied to impound volume. It was exactly what they needed to prove systematic corruption. She sent everything to Agent Morrison with a single word in the subject line: jackpot. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived at Naomi's house. Camila Reyes came to Laya's home with her phone and a determined expression. I need to talk to you, Camila said. They sat on Laya's porch, the afternoon sun warming their faces. Camila was 32, from El Salvador, working 3 jobs to support her family and save for nursing school. I drive for Uber and Lyft, she explained. Mostly in that neighborhood and around it. And last year I saw Sloan pull over probably a dozen people. They were all Black or Latino drivers. He always finds a reason to pull them over, she said. Did you ever report it? Naomi asked. To whom? The police? They'd just say he's doing his job. Camilla's smile was bitter. 3 months ago, he pulled my cousin over. He said her taillight wasn't working, but it was. Then he claimed he smelled marijuana, but he didn't. He impounded the car on suspicion of drug trafficking. My cousin lost her job because she couldn't get to work. She lost her apartment. He had to move in with his family. All because Sloan had to meet his quota that month, she said. I'm sorry, Naomi said. Don't be, catch him. Catch them all, Camilla said, pulling out her phone. I've been documenting Sloan's stops for months. Photos, videos, license plates. I have a complete file on the people he's targeted. I was wondering how I could report this without being deported since I'm not a citizen yet, but then he went after you, and I realized a federal agent could actually do something, she replied. She showed Naomi her phone. Dozens of photos and short videos. Sloan was pulling over cars in the same neighborhoods, in the same way. He always found an excuse. He always called Dixon towing. These are witness statements, Naomi said. Can you convince these people to talk to federal investigators? She asked. I can try. Some are undocumented and won't take the risk, but others have legal status and are just scared. If you promise them protection, she continued. I promise, Naomi said seriously. The federal government can provide protection, and we're not ICE. We don't deal with immigration status. We deal with police corruption and civil rights violations. Camila's relief was evident. Then yes, I'll help, whatever you need, she said. After Camila left, Naomi sat on the porch with her mother, watching the neighborhood come alive with evening activities. You're building something, Laya said. A coalition, Naomi confirmed. Officer Park from the inside, Camila and her community from the outside, and me from the federal level. If we work together, we can really make a difference, she said. What if you fail? Laya asked. Naomi touched her bruised throat. Then at least we'll have tried. That's more than most people can do, she said. The phone rang. Agent Morrison, the federal grand jury is convening on Monday. Bring everything you have. We're going to catch Sloan, Kessler, Dixon, and everyone else involved in this, he said. Naomi showed the message to her mother. Laya read it and smiled. Your father would be so proud, Laya said. I know, Mom, Naomi said, her throat sore but her voice steady. And I'll make sure everyone remembers, starting with Trent Sloan. Inside the house, the laptop beeped, signaling another email. The FBI had finished analyzing Sloan's financial records. He had a bank account in the Cayman Islands. Over the past 3 years, more than $200,000 had been deposited into it. It all came from shell companies that traced back to Ty Dixon's network. Sloan wasn't just following orders. He was actively profiting from these schemes. And federal prosecutors loved financial evidence. It was hard to say I didn't know when there were bank records showing how much money he had received. Naomi forwarded the financial data to the task force. Then she opened a new document and began drafting the victim impact statement for Sloan's trial. The battle had only just begun. But Naomi Caldwell had federal resources, documentary evidence, and a coalition of allies who had had enough. Officer Trent Sloan and his corrupt network were about to learn what happens when you target the wrong person. Justice was coming. And this justice would be federal, comprehensive, and absolutely ruthless. The First Baptist Church on Auburn Avenue had been the cornerstone of Atlanta's black community since 1867. Its walls had witnessed civil rights meetings in the 1960s, provided shelter to families during the turbulent decades that followed. And now, on a Sunday evening in early June, it was filled with people who had come to explain that they had been targeted by a system designed to exploit them. 72-year-old Vietnam veteran Reverend Marcus Burke stood at the pulpit with commanding presence. His graying hair was neatly trimmed, and the Purple Heart medal on his lapel reflected the light streaming through the stained glass windows. We are gathered here tonight, he began. We are gathered to bear witness, to speak the truth, to shine a light on the darkness that hides behind badges and official authority. Naomi sat in the front pew of the church with her mother and Camila. The swelling had gone down, but there were still visible bruises on her throat. Behind them, the church pews were filled with families. 37 families, to be exact. Camila had spent the past week communicating through her network and had found one person after another with the same story. I'd like to begin by introducing Special Agent Naomi Caldwell, said Father Burke. Some of you saw what happened to her last Thursday. You've all seen the video shared nationwide. Agent Caldwell is here tonight not as a federal officer, but as a member of the community who has personally experienced the same kind of harassment many of you have endured. Naomi stood up, her legs still trembling slightly. She walked toward the microphone, holding her federal ID card. This, she said, holding up her ID, was supposed to protect me. Federal law enforcement, 8 years of service. But when Officer Sloan saw me in my car, none of that mattered. He saw a black woman in a nice car and assumed I had stolen it. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check my license. He just decided I was a criminal and acted accordingly, she said. She paused for a moment, her hurt voice somehow making her words stronger. But the thing is, I was lucky. I survived because I had my badge and another officer arrived in time. How many of you weren't so lucky? She asked. Hands shot up in the sacred space. dozens of hands. Then tonight, Naomi said, we will document each of your stories. We have federal investigators here. We have lawyers. We have people who can help you get justice. The first to speak was Marcus Thompson, a 45-year-old construction worker. He walked toward the microphone with the measured steps of someone who had been carrying a heavy load for a very long time. 2 years ago, he began, I was driving home from work. Officer Sloan pulled me over and said my license plate light wasn't working. I got out to check it. My light was working perfectly. While I was checking it, he searched my truck without permission. He found my tools and claimed they looked suspicious, like they were stolen. He impounded my truck to Dixon Towing, he said. Marcus's voice trembled. Those tools were my livelihood. $15,000 worth of professional equipment I'd bought over 10 years. Dixon demanded $800 to release my truck, plus $100 a day in storage fees. I'm a contractor. I couldn't afford to take 2 weeks off to save the money. By the time I got my truck back, I'd lost 3 jobs and my reputation was ruined. An FBI agent sitting in the back was taking notes. This was evidence. Repeated evidence. The kind of evidence that could prove systematic abuse. Story after story poured out. Patrick Washington had his old model Cadillac, a gift from his late father, impounded on suspicion of being stolen, even though the registration was in the glove compartment. Each story followed the same pattern. Stop on a pretext. False accusation. Dixon Towing. Exorbitant fees. Lives turned upside down. And always, the name of Officer Trent Sloan appeared in the reports. Naomi watched as FBI agents filled their notebooks, Justice Department attorneys recorded testimonies, and IRS inspectors took notes on financial impact. This was no longer just her case. It was a federal civil rights investigation involving dozens of victims and a clear pattern of systematic abuse. After the final statement, Father Burke stood up, his eyes tearful but his voice strong. 37 families, 37 stories. And these are just the ones who felt safe enough to come forward tonight. How many more are out there who are too afraid, too traumatized, too convinced the system will never listen? He turned to Naomi. But now there's someone who can force the system to listen. Agent Caldwell, what happens now? Naomi stood up again. Whatever happens next, we'll build a solid federal case. Investigators will contact each of you who spoke tonight. Your stories will be officially documented. We'll subpoena records from the police department and Dixon Towing. We'll follow the money. And not just Officer Sloan, but everyone who supported him, protected him, and profited from his abuse. But the system would not give up without a fight. The next morning, Naomi received a call from Assistant District Attorney Richard Mercer. She knew who he was. A rising political figure running for district attorney on a tough-on-crime platform. According to the financial records provided by June Park, he was someone who had received significant donations from Ty Dixon's network of shell companies. Agent Caldwell, I'd like to discuss the allegations against Officer Sloan, Mercer said, his voice soft and professional. I think there's been a misunderstanding about the incident. There's no misunderstanding, Naomi replied. Your officer assaulted a federal agent during a traffic stop. Everything is on video. Officer Sloan was following standard protocols for a suspected stolen vehicle. My car wasn't stolen, it was properly registered. He had no reasonable cause to stop me, and certainly no reason to choke me nearly to death. Mercer's voice shifted slightly, taking on a more conciliatory tone. I understand you're angry. You have every right to be angry. But criminal charges might be excessive. How about we propose a settlement? The city could pay you compensation for your injuries. Officer Sloan could receive additional training, and we could avoid a long, divisive trial. Naomi let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You want me to take the money and shut up? Let me be very clear, Mr. Mercer. This isn't about the money. It's about accountability. Officer Sloan committed federal crimes. So did those who created the quota system he enforced. So did those who profited from it. She paused for a moment, waiting for her words to sink in. People like Ty Dixon donated $30,000 to your campaign last year. How much of that money came from foreclosure fees stolen from families who couldn't afford to pay? Silence on the other end. Then carefully. Those are serious allegations, and I have serious evidence. Check your email. I sent you a copy of the federal subpoena for all financial records related to Dixon Towing's political donations. You have 48 hours to comply before I add obstruction charges. He hung up and immediately called Agent Morrison. Mercer just tried to close this. He's trying to protect Dixon, which shows he's in danger. So are we. The FBI is already investigating his campaign finances. But Naomi, be careful. Cornered politicians are dangerous. He has resources and connections. So do I. Federal resources and connections to 37 families seeking justice. That afternoon, Morrison's warning proved prescient. Sergeant Mara Kessler held a press conference outside police headquarters, accompanied by the police union president and several uniformed officers. We stand behind Officer Sloan, Kessler told the assembled cameras. He's a 15-year veteran with an exemplary record. The incident with Agent Caldwell was an unfortunate misunderstanding, but it cannot justify the federal intervention we are currently witnessing. A reporter asked, "Sergeant, what about the allegations of a quota system that requires officers to make seizures?" Completely false. Yes, we have performance metrics, but these are designed to ensure officers are actively patrolling and serving the community, not to generate revenue. What about the connection between Officer Sloan and Dixon Towing? Kessler's tone hardened. Dixon Towing is a private contractor selected through a competitive bidding process. Any allegations of impropriety are baseless and frankly an insult to the professional officers of this department. Naomi watched the press conference from her mother's house, her anger growing with every evasive answer and denial. Camila sat beside her, equally furious. "They're lying," Camila said flatly. "I documented dozens of stops Sloan made. These aren't night performance metrics, they're targeted harassment." "I know, but Kessler is very good at this. He's been protecting corrupt officers for years." Naomi opened her laptop. It's time to challenge their narrative. She drafted a statement and sent it to all news outlets covering the attack. Deputy District Attorney Mercer offered me a settlement to avoid prosecuting Officer Sloan. Sergeant Kessler denies the existence of quota systems documented in internal emails provided by whistleblowers. This is not about a single bad cop. It's about systematic corruption that profits by exploiting vulnerable communities. The federal investigation will continue despite attempts by local officials to obstruct it. The statement went viral within hours. News anchors debated it, legal analysts discussed its implications, and city officials came under pressure to cooperate with federal investigators rather than fight them. This pressure dramatically increased when the FBI executed search warrants. At 6 a.m. on Wednesday morning, federal agents raided 3 of Dixon Towing's impound lots simultaneously. Naomi wasn't there. She was still on sick leave. But Agent Morrison texted her the developments. His message read, "We found the jackpot. Dixon had everything stashed away. Every fake stolen vehicle report. Every bribe payment. Every communication with Sloan and the other officers. The guy thought he was untouchable, so he didn't bother hiding the evidence." The seized documents were devastating. Spreadsheets tracking which officers made the most seizures, and bonuses paid secretly through shell companies. Emails between Dixon and Sergeant Kessler discussing monthly performance targets. Text messages between Sloan and Dixon coordinating which neighborhoods to target for maximum profit. And most damning, a ledger showing payments to ADA Mercer's campaign fund, coinciding with decisions not to prosecute certain officers for misconduct. This was a conspiracy. RICO-level organized crime hiding behind badges and public office. Federal prosecutors filed charges at noon. Officer Trent Sloan, assault on a federal official, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy to commit fraud, accepting bribes. Sergeant Mara Kessler, conspiracy, abuse of office, obstruction of justice. Ty Dixon, extortion, bribery, fraud. ADA Richard Mercer, accepting illegal campaign contributions, conspiracy, obstruction, all federal charges. All crimes punishable by imprisonment. The Atlanta Police Union tried to fight back, claiming federal overreach and demanding the charges be dropped. But the evidence was overwhelming, and public outrage was immense. Each news cycle brought new revelations. Each document dump exposed deeper corruption. And throughout this process, Naomi, Reverend Burke, and 37 families prepared for the next step, filing a class-action civil rights lawsuit against the city, the police department, and Dixon Towing. The lawsuit alleged systematic violations of constitutional rights, targeting of minority communities, and conspiracy to profit from illegal seizures. The lawsuit demanded not only monetary compensation, but also structural reforms, the elimination of quota systems, independent oversight of seizures, compensation for all victims, and a consent decree requiring the police department to undergo federal oversight. When the lawsuit was filed, Naomi stood alongside Reverend Burke, Camilla, and representatives of the 37 families. Her voice was still hoarse, but it was strong. This lawsuit represents hundreds of people who have been targeted, exploited, and told that their suffering doesn't matter. She told the cameras, "We are here to say that it does matter. Every car wrongfully seized, every family that went into debt to pay Dixon's fees, every person afraid to drive in their own neighborhood because they could be the next target. It all matters, and all of it will change." Behind him, Marcus Thompson held a photo of his seized work truck. Elena Rodriguez stood with her daughter, now 9 years old and finally able to see that her mother's trauma was justified. Patrick Washington clutched the registration for his father's Cadillac, finally returned from Dixon's impound lot. They were no longer just victims, they were now plaintiffs. They were active participants demanding justice. And for the first time in years, the system that had oppressed them was being held accountable for its crimes. That night, Naomi sat with her mother on Laya's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. The street that had suffocated her was now quiet and peaceful, but Naomi knew it would never be the same again. "Your father used to say that evil thrives when good people remain silent," Laya said softly. "You didn't remain silent. None of those families remained silent, and now the whole country is watching." "I'm scared, Mom," Naomi confessed. "I'm scared of what they'll do next. I'm afraid of retaliation. I'm afraid that despite all this evidence, they'll somehow walk free." "It's reasonable to be afraid, but you're not facing this alone. There are federal agents, lawyers, 37 families, an entire community, and a church full of people waiting for someone to stand up." Laya held her daughter's hand. "And I'm here too. I didn't raise you to be afraid of badges." Naomi smiled despite her fear. "No, you didn't." The phone rang. "Agent Morrison, the grand jury has indicted all the defendants. Sloan, Kessler, Dixon, and Mercer will be arrested tomorrow morning. Federal marshals are coordinating. I wanted you to know." Naomi showed the message to her mother. Laya read the message and nodded with satisfaction. "Justice moves slowly," she said, "but when good people push it forward, it moves decisively. Tomorrow those people who think they are untouchable will learn something different." At home, Naomi's laptop beeped to signal another email. It was from Officer June Park, who had taken administrative leave after providing evidence to federal investigators. "I have no regrets," June wrote. "Even if my career is over, I have no regrets about doing the right thing. Thank you for giving me the courage to speak out. Some things are more important than a badge." Naomi replied, "Your statement will help convict corrupt officers and reform a broken system. That is more valuable than any badge. Also, the federal government is always looking for honest investigators. Let me know if you're interested." The next morning would bring arrests, a walkout by offenders, and the beginning of cases that would reshape the Atlanta Police Department. But tonight, Naomi Caldwell sat on her mother's porch, savoring a quiet moment of satisfaction. She had survived an attempted murder by a corrupt officer. She had sparked a federal case exposing systematic abuse. She had organized a community to demand justice. And tomorrow, those who thought themselves above the law would learn that federal justice has a long reach and an even longer memory. Officer Trent Sloan had tried to strangle her to death. Instead, Naomi would strangle the corrupt system that had protected him for 15 years. A fair trade. The Richard B. Russell Federal Building and United States Courthouse stood majestically in downtown Atlanta. Its modern glass and steel facade was designed to reflect transparency and power. 3 weeks after Naomi was attacked, on a humid Monday morning in late June, the building was filled with people who had come to watch justice take its course. Federal prosecutors moved swiftly, consolidating cases for efficiency. Officer Trent Sloan, Sergeant Mara Kessler, Ty Dixon, and ADA Richard Mercer would all be tried together, their fates intertwined due to the conspiracy they had participated in for years. Judge Patricia Morales was a 60-year-old Latina who had been appointed to the federal bench after 20 years as a civil rights attorney. Reviewing the case files, Morales made it clear she would show zero tolerance for police corruption and abuse of power. The courtroom was packed with standing spectators. Naomi sat behind the prosecution table with her mother Camila, Father Burke, and representatives from 37 families. The back rows were filled with members of the media. Cameras were prohibited, but reporters were taking notes furiously. 4 defendants and their expensive lawyers sat at the defense table. Sloan, wearing a suit instead of his uniform, was trying to look respectable. Kessler, dressed professionally, was clenching his lips nervously instead of his usual cool demeanor. Dixon wore designer clothes full of money and arrogance. And Mercer, the promising district attorney, looked like a man watching his political career fall apart in real time. The chief prosecutor was James Chen, an experienced attorney who had built his career prosecuting public corruption. He stood up to deliver his opening statement with the calm confidence of someone holding all the cards. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Chen began, approaching the jury stand. "Over the next 2 weeks you will learn about a criminal organization operating under the protection of the law. Not bank-robbing ski-masked criminals, but police officers, commanders, and public officials who systematically exploited the communities they swore to protect, using their badges and positions." He brought up the first image on the courtroom monitors, a map of Atlanta, with the locations of every vehicle seized over the past 5 years marked with red dots. "Did you notice the pattern? 92% of these seizures occurred in neighborhoods that were predominantly Black and Latino. This wasn't because crime rates were higher in these neighborhoods or because the vehicles were actually stolen. It was because the defendants targeted vulnerable communities that were less likely to have the resources to fight back." The next slide showed Sloan's arrest statistics were shown. Officer Trent Sloan seized an average of 3.2 vehicles per week. His colleagues averaged 0.8. Either Officer Sloan encountered 4 times more stolen vehicles than others, or he fabricated probable causes to meet Sergeant Kessler's quota. Chen clicked on the financial records. These seizures generated revenue. For Ty Dixon's towing company, this company paid bribes to officers through shell companies. For Sergeant Kessler, who received consulting fees from the same shell companies. And for ADA Mercer, who received campaign donations that helped cover up complaints when victims sought justice. He turned to the defendants, but they made a critical mistake. On May 23, Officer Sloan stopped the wrong person. Homeland Security Investigations Special Agent Naomi Caldwell was going home to visit her mother. She hadn't committed a traffic violation, her car hadn't been stolen, but Officer Sloan saw a black woman in a nice car and decided she was a criminal. The final slide showed frames from Camilla's video. Sloan was dragging Naomi out of her car. He was slamming her against the hood. He was choking her. Naomi's badge was finally visible. What you're seeing is attempted murder, assault on a federal officer. And when this incident was caught on camera by multiple witnesses, a years-long conspiracy was exposed. The evidence will show that these defendants did not just commit individual crimes, they ran an organized crime syndicate. And under federal RICO laws, that makes each of them responsible for every crime committed to further that syndicate. Chen returned to his seat. The defense attorneys exchanged worried glances. The opening statement had been devastating, and they knew it. Gerald Hutchins, Sloan's attorney, attempted to object. Jurors, you will hear a lot of inflammatory rhetoric about criminal organizations and systematic abuse. However, the evidence will show that Officer Sloan was doing his job. He made difficult decisions in tough situations. Yes, he stopped Agent Caldwell. Yes, he used force. But he believed he was dealing with a stolen vehicle, and he reasonably believed that. This is not a conspiracy. This is a tragic misunderstanding used as a weapon by federal prosecutors to attack local law enforcement. It was a weak defense, and everyone knew it. With financial records showing Sloan receiving payment from the tow company, it was difficult to argue misunderstanding. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. First witness, Dr. Elena Martinez, the emergency room doctor who treated Naomi. She described the injuries with clinical precision: bruising consistent with carotid strangulation, petechial hemorrhages indicating oxygen deprivation, and a damaged larynx that could cause permanent injury or death. Dr. Martinez stated, "In my professional opinion, applying pressure for an additional 30 to 45 seconds would have resulted in brain damage from oxygen deprivation or death from a crushed windpipe." Hutchins tried to shake him down in cross-examination. Don't police officers receive training in restraint techniques? They are trained in techniques designed to control suspects without causing permanent injury. What happened to Agent Caldwell went far beyond control. It was an assault intended to cause serious bodily harm. Second witness, Officer June Park. She took the stand in civilian clothes. Her police career had ended after she provided evidence to federal investigators, but her testimony convicted him. "When I arrived at the scene, I saw Officer Sloan choking an unconscious woman. She wasn't moving, she wasn't resisting. I told him repeatedly to let her go. He refused until she showed her federal ID." Chen projected the footage from June's body camera onto monitors in the courtroom. The jury silently watched as Sloan choked Naomi, ignored June's orders, and only released her when the HSI badge became visible. "Officer Park, based on your training and experience, was Officer Sloan's use of force justified?" "No." Agent Caldwell was compliant. He identified himself as a federal law enforcement officer. He was unarmed. He was not aggressive. There was no reason to justify the level of force used. "Tell the jury about the quota system you documented in the materials you provided to investigators." June pulled out copies of the emails she had saved. Sergeant Kessler sent monthly directives to patrol officers summarizing to performance expectations. These included numbers for traffic stops, citations issued, and vehicles impounded. Officers who consistently met or exceeded these numbers received better evaluations, preferred shifts, and promotion recommendations. Chen projected the emails onto monitors. The jury could read Kessler's own words. "The team is 23% below our impound target this month. I want everyone to increase activity in zones 4, 7, and 9. Remember, our contract with Dixon includes performance incentives." Kessler's lawyer objected vehemently, but Judge Morales overruled the objection. The emails were properly authenticated and directly relevant to the case. Third witness, Naomi Caldwell. She walked to the witness stand with her head held high, the faint bruises from Sloan's attack 3 weeks ago still visible on her throat. She wore her Department of Homeland Security badge on her belt, a deliberate choice to remind the jury of what Sloan had ignored. Chen gently recounted her history. 8 years with HSI, dozens of successful investigations, praise and awards, a career built on dedication and professionalism. "Agent Caldwell, tell the jury what happened on May 23rd. Naomi's voice was still a bit hoarse but strong. "I was driving home to visit my mother. I pulled over to park 3 houses down from her place. Officer Sloan's patrol car appeared behind me, sirens blaring. I put my hands on the steering wheel and waited for him to approach. Then what happened? He ordered me out of the car, saying it had been reported stolen. I tried to explain that the car was registered to me. He became aggressive, pulled me out of the car, and slammed me against the hood. I tried to tell him I was a federal law enforcement officer. He wouldn't listen. Chen opened Camila's video. Is this an accurate recording of what happened? Naomi watched herself choking, her face perfectly capturing the moment her vision began to fade. Yes. What were you thinking as Officer Sloan was choking you? That I was going to die. That a police officer was going to kill me in front of my mother's house because he decided I didn't have the right to live in my own neighborhood. Naomi's voice trembled slightly, and that if I died he would probably claim I attacked him and get away with it. The jury looked horrified. Several members were struggling to hold back tears. When did you show your ID? When I regained consciousness. I used my last ounce of strength to open my jacket. Officer Park recognized my badge immediately and ordered Officer Sloan to release me. What was Officer Sloan's reaction when he saw your HSI ID? He claimed it was fake. Even when faced with federal identification, and even if another officer confirmed it was genuine, he still insisted I was a criminal. Chen let that statement hang in the air. No further questions. Hutchins began cross-examination, but he was cautious. Attacking a federal agent who was nearly killed on camera was a dangerous situation. Agent Caldwell, isn't it possible that Officer Sloan genuinely believed your vehicle was stolen? No, my vehicle was properly registered. Any database check would have confirmed that. He never checked the license plate. He never asked for my registration. He saw a black woman and assumed she was guilty. You can't know what he was thinking. I can read his arrest patterns. 92% target minority drivers. I can read his financial records showing payments from the towing company. I can watch the video of him choking me while I tell him I'm federal law enforcement. This isn't confusion. This is malice. Hutchins tried a few more angles, but Naomi remained resolute. When she finally sat down, it was clear that the cross-examination had only strengthened Naomi's testimony. Fourth witness, Camila Reyes. She described what she saw and why she started recording. For months, I saw Officer Sloan stopping people in my neighborhood. They were always black or Latino drivers. He always found a reason to pull them over. When I saw him stop Agent Caldwell, I knew I had to record it. The video played again, this time Camila narrating the key moments. Here you can see Agent Caldwell not resisting. Here the woman is clearly unconscious, but the man is still choking her. Here Officer Park arrives and immediately recognizes the federal badge. And here, even after seeing the badge, Officer Sloan claims it's fake. Fifth witness, Marcus Thompson, representing 37 families. He recounted the story of losing his work truck and livelihood. Chen then presented a devastating pattern analysis. 37 families, all with nearly identical stories, all stopped by officers working under Sloan or Kessler's quota system, all towed by Dixon Towing. These were not isolated incidents, Chen told the jury. This was systematic, organized, a criminal enterprise designed to make money by targeting vulnerable communities. The defense tried to fight back. Character witnesses for Sloan spoke of his years of service. Use-of-force experts claimed his actions were within training guidelines. Financial analysts attempted to explain the suspicious payments, but they had no answer for the videos. There was no explanation for the quota emails, there was no justification for payments made by a towing company to a police officer. By the end of the first week, the prosecution had built a compelling case. The second week brought financial evidence. IRS investigators detailed the flow of money, Dixon's payments to shell companies, his distributions to Sloan and Kessler, Mercer's contributions to the campaign fund. FBI agents presented evidence of conspiracy, text messages coordinating targets, emails discussing performance bonuses, recorded phone calls arranging bribe payments. The final blow came when the forensic accountant showed the jury exactly how much money each defendant made from this fraud. Sloan, $187,000 over 5 years. Kessler, $243,000. Dixon, $2.4 million net profit from seized vehicles. Mercer, $78,000 in campaign contributions linked to decisions not to prosecute officers. This was large-scale corruption hiding behind badges in public office. Closing arguments were held on Friday afternoon. Chen stood before the jury one last time. You've seen the evidence, the video of Officer Sloan attempting to kill a federal agent, financial records showing payments made by a towing company to police officers, emails detailing quotas set by Sergeant Kessler to increase seizures, campaign contributions to ADA Mercer coinciding with decisions to cover up complaints. This is RICO, this is organized crime, and these defendants must answer for every victim they have exploited over the years. The defense's closing arguments were desperate and unconvincing. Claims of overzealous prosecution, misunderstood intentions, sincere mistakes. The jury deliberated for 11 hours over 2 days. When they returned, the jury forewoman, a black woman in her 50s, who reminded Naomi of her mother, stood up and read the verdict in a clear, determined voice. In the case of the United States versus Trent Sloan, on the charge of assault on a federal officer, guilty. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. He continued in the same manner for all the defendants. All charges, guilty, 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 guilty. Sloan's face turned pale. Kessler covered his mouth with his hands. Dixon slumped in his chair. Mercer stared at the table in disbelief. The courtroom erupted. Families embraced each other. Father Burke raised his hands in prayer. Camilla wiped away her tears. Naomi sat motionless, feeling the weight of 3 weeks of fear and anger finally lift. Judge Morales banged his gavel to restore order. Sentencing will be in 4 weeks. The defendants will remain in custody until then. Court is adjourned. As federal marshals led the defendants away in handcuffs, Sloan's eyes met Naomi's one last time. He saw no remorse there. There was no sign that she understood the mistake she had made. Only anger that she was finally facing the consequences. She met his gaze until he was the first to look away. Outside the courthouse, a media crowd had gathered. Naomi stood before the microphones with Chen, Father Burke, and the families. Today the jury said badges don't grant immunity, Naomi told the cameras. Police officers who abuse their power will face federal consequences. Communities subjected to exploitation deserve justice. This verdict is for every family who lost a vehicle they can never replace. For everyone afraid to drive in their own neighborhoods. For everyone told their pain doesn't matter. A reporter asked, "What's next, Agent Caldwell?" "The verdict. Then the civil lawsuit will continue. Then we will ensure systematic reforms are made so this never happens again." Naomi's voice was strong now. The damage from the pressure on her throat finally healed. "We won't stop until every corrupt system that made this possible is eliminated." That night, Leah Caldwell held a celebration at First Baptist Church. Soul-nourishing food, sweet tea, and gospel music filled the church. The 37 victimized families had finally proven they were right. Naomi stood beside June Park, who had sacrificed her career in law enforcement to do what was right. "Do you regret it?" Naomi asked. "Not at all," June said firmly. "I became a police officer to help people. Testifying against Sloan helped more people than anything I did while in uniform. Actually," she paused, looking uncertain. "Were you serious when you said federal law enforcement is looking for honest investigators?" Naomi smiled. "Absolutely. ASI needs honest people, people who understand that a badge is not a weapon but a responsibility. Give me a month to wrap up this case, then we'll discuss your application." As the celebration continued, Father Burke's deep voice spread throughout the sacred space as he prayed. "God, we thank you for justice being served, for the truth coming out, for courage being found. And we pledge to continue this fight until all children are treated with honor and respect." Naomi stood beside her mother, watching the terrorized families now celebrate their victory. It wasn't over yet. The sentencing was still uncertain. The civil suit was ongoing. Reforms needed to be implemented. But tonight they could celebrate, because a jury of 12 citizens had examined the evidence and decided that police corruption would not be tolerated. That federal agents deserved protection, that Black and Latino communities deserved justice, and that Trent Sloan, Mara Kessler, Ty Dixon, and Richard Mercer would pay for their crimes with years in prison. It was a good start, and tomorrow Naomi Caldwell would continue her work to ensure that this was just the beginning. 4 weeks after the guilty verdict, the same federal courtroom filled again for sentencing. But this time the atmosphere was different. The defendants had spent a month in federal custody, their arrogance gone in the face of the reality of prison jumpsuits and shackles. The families of the victims sat in the gallery with the quiet satisfaction of people who had finally been heard. Judge Patricia Morales entered the courtroom with the pre-sentence reports in her hand. She had spent weeks reviewing the victims' impact statements, the defendants' criminal histories, and the arguments presented by both the prosecution and the defense regarding appropriate sentencing. Naomi sat in the front row with her mother, her throat now completely healed, her voice restored. She had submitted her own victim impact statement, a 5-page document detailing not only the physical assault but also the psychological trauma of being targeted by someone who had sworn to protect her, the near-fatal danger of being strangled while trying to do her job, and the fear she still felt when she saw police lights in her rearview mirror. Judge Morales looked at the 4 defendants standing next to their lawyers. "Before I deliver the verdict, I want to address something that has been said repeatedly during this trial. The defense characterized these crimes as mistakes, misunderstandings, or overzealous policing. However, the evidence tells a different story. This was a systematic, deliberate, and organized act, a conspiracy to profit from the exploitation of defenseless communities." He took out his notes. "Mr. Sloan, You swore an oath to protect and serve. For 15 years you violated that oath, targeted people because of the color of their skin, fabricated possible motives, and used your badge to terrorize families who were powerless against your abuse. And when confronted by a federal agent with the resources to fight back, instead of admitting your mistake, you tried to kill him. Sloan stood stiffly, his face pale. For the crime of assaulting a federal officer, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. For the crime of depriving people of their rights under the guise of the law, I sentence you to 10 years in prison. For the crime of conspiracy to commit fraud, I sentence you to 5 years in prison. For accepting bribes, I sentence you to 5 years in prison. Total sentence 35 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. Sloan's knees trembled slightly. 35 years. He would be 73 before he was eligible for parole. Furthermore, Judge Morales continued, you are permanently barred from any law enforcement position and forfeit all your pension rights. Your victims deserved better, society deserved better, and you will spend the next 30 years contemplating the damage you have caused. He turned to Sergeant Kessler. Ms. Kessler, you were in a position of authority. Officers looked to you for guidance and leadership. Instead, you created a quota system to generate revenue through illegal seizures. You protected corrupt officers. You retaliated against whistleblowers. And you personally profited from the cruel suffering of families who trusted the police to serve them fairly. Kessler's usual arrogant demeanor had completely vanished. I sentence you to 20 years for conspiracy, 10 years for abuse of office, and 5 years for obstruction of justice. Total 35 years. In addition, your pension will be forfeited, and you will be permanently barred from public office. Next was Ty Dixon. Mr. Dixon, you turned vehicle impoundment into a criminal enterprise. You bribed police officers. You demanded exorbitant fees from families who couldn't afford to pay. You profited from goods stolen not by vehicle owners but by corrupt police officers. Your towing company earned over $2 million in illegal income. Judge Morales's voice hardened. Under RICO laws, I am sentencing you to 40 years in federal prison. You will forfeit all assets derived from your criminal activities, including your tow yards, vehicles, and properties, and you will pay restitution to every victim identified in this case. Finally, ADA addressed Richard Mercer. Mr. Mercer, you were tasked with prosecuting criminals. Instead, you became one yourself. You accepted campaign contributions tied to decisions not to prosecute police officers. You covered up complaints. You obstructed justice. And when a federal agent was attacked, your first instinct was to offer a settlement to cover up the incident rather than hold the perpetrator accountable. Mercer looked down at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison for corruption. Your law license is permanently revoked, and you are barred from public office. Your betrayal of the public trust was complete and unforgivable. As the sentences were read, Naomi felt her mother squeeze her hand. Justice. Real, tangible federal justice. These men and women who thought themselves untouchable would spend decades behind bars. But Judge Morales wasn't finished yet. I also order the Atlanta Police Department to be subject to federal consent decrees for at least 5 years. An independent monitor will oversee all use of force incidents, vehicle stops, and officer discipline. Quota systems are hereby prohibited. The department will establish community oversight boards with real enforcement authority. Father Burke's amen echoed through the courtroom. The marshals escorted the defendants out. Sloan looked back once, his face a mixture of disbelief and helpless rage. But Naomi hesitated not at all. She had survived his attempt to kill her, and now she had seen him receive a sentence that would prevent him from ever harming anyone again. 2 weeks later, the First Baptist Church was full again, but this time not for testimony, but for celebration. The lawsuit against the city and police department resulted in $8.5 million in damages. The damages were distributed among the 37 families who had been victims of the seizure plan. Reverend Burke, wearing the medals he had received in Vietnam, and stood at the pulpit with a smile that reached his eyes. Behind him, on a table, were stacks of certified checks. Today, he said, his deep voice filling the church, we see justice made real. These checks won't erase the trauma. They won't bring back lost time or missed opportunities, but they represent an acknowledgement, an endorsement. The city is acknowledging that what happened to you was wrong. Families stepped forward one by one. Marcus Thompson received a check for $147,000 for the truck he lost, the tools, and his contracting business that went bankrupt because he couldn't work. Holding the check with trembling hands, tears streamed down his face. Now I can rebuild, he told the congregation. I can buy new tools. I can start over. And this time, I won't have to live in fear of being targeted. Elena Rodriguez received $89,000. She stepped up to the microphone with her 9-year-old daughter. This money will pay off the debt we incurred. It will finance my daughter's college education. But more important than the money is what it represents. Finally, someone believed in us. Finally, someone said what happened to us mattered. Patrick Washington received $176,000, enough to fully restore his father's Cadillac and honor the memory it represented. Sarah Chen received $52,000. Andre Williams received $94,000. Each family had a story. Each check represented justice delayed but ultimately served. Naomi stood on the sidelines, watching the ceremony with quiet satisfaction. The compensation paid to her by the city, $2.3 million for assault and attempted murder, would largely go to charity. She would donate $2 million to establish a legal defense fund for people facing police misconduct who couldn't afford a lawyer. The remainder would cover her medical expenses and therapy. "You could retire with this money," Laya had said. "I could," Naomi had conceded. "But I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing this because if I don't use my resources to help others, then what's the point of having them?" After the checks were distributed, Father Burke called Naomi to the podium. "This woman," he said, placing his hand on her shoulder, "was nearly dying on a street 3 blocks from here. She could have accepted the deal and remained silent. Instead, she filed a federal lawsuit that exposed years of corruption. She organized this community. She gave a voice to people who had been silent. And because of her courage, 37 families are reunited today." The congregation rose to their feet and applauded. Naomi felt a lump in her throat. This time not from injury but from emotion. "I didn't do this alone," she said when the applause died down. Officer June Park risked her career to provide evidence. Camila Reyes documented everything while others looked away. Every family who stepped forward to share their stories. Father Burke, who organized this community. My mother, who raised me to stand up against injustice. This was a collective effort, and it shows what people can do when they refuse to accept that wrongs cannot be righted. The next day, Naomi went to what had once been Dixon Towing's. Federal marshals had seized all of Dixon's assets, and now 3 lots were being liquidated. But before the properties could be sold, there was one last task: returning the vehicles that were still impounded. The once locked and guarded gates were now open. Federal agents escorted families who had been forced to abandon their cars because they couldn't afford Dixon's exorbitant fees. Mrs. Washington got into the Honda Civic that Dixon had seized 3 years ago, claiming it had been abandoned. The engine ran perfectly. Dixon had maintained the vehicles while holding them, knowing he could sell them for profit. "My car," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "The car I thought I'd lost forever." The families retrieved their possessions one by one. Some immediately drove away, enjoying their regained freedom of movement. Others sat in their cars and cried, trying to process the resolution of years of trauma. Naomi walked around the parking lot with Agent Morrison, documenting the returns for the federal case file. "We've identified 73 more vehicles that were seized under false pretenses," Morrison said. "The families are being contacted. The cars of those who cannot be located will be auctioned off, and the proceeds will go to the compensation fund." "What about the parking lots?" "They'll be sold. The proceeds will also go to the compensation fund." "Dixon won't get a penny. Everything he built through corruption is being torn down." As they spoke, the children began to emerge. The children who had feared this place, this castle where their families' cars had disappeared, were now running and playing through the open gates. Their laughter replaced the angry arguments and desperate pleas for an extension on impossible fees. The nearby church tower bells began to ring. Father Burke pulled the rope with steady hands, sending deep, clear tones throughout the neighborhood. Each chime signaled transformation, reclaimed territory, hope replacing fear. Naomi's phone vibrated. A message had arrived from her HSI commander. "Your new assignment is confirmed. Commander of the Joint Task Force, Public Corruption Division. Congratulations, you earned it." She showed the message to her mother, who was accompanying her to watch the land being cleared. "A promotion," Laya said proudly. "From surviving an attack to leading the fight against corruption. Your father would be so proud." "I'm proud of myself too, Mom." Naomi watched another family drive away in a reclaimed vehicle. That's what the badge means. Not power over people, but the power to protect them. 3 months later, on a bright October afternoon, Naomi returned to Maplewood Drive for the first time since the attack. The street looked the same: well-kept houses, green lawns, the suburban tranquility she once took for granted. But beneath that calm surface, everything had changed. The new police administration had implemented reforms. Body cameras were mandatory, and footage was stored on independent servers. A powerful oversight board scrutinized every use of force incident. The quota system had been eliminated and replaced with community policing metrics that measured trust and relationships rather than arrests and seizures. Officer June Park walked beside Naomi, dressed in civilian clothes but wearing a federal badge. "Off to." She had joined HSI as an investigator, trading her career in local law enforcement for a federal job focused on police corruption cases. "How does it feel to be back?" June asked. "Weird," Naomi admitted. "This is almost where I died. But it's also where everything changed, where the system that protected corrupt cops finally came to light." They walked to the spot where Sloan had stopped her. Someone had left flowers there, a small monument marking where a federal agent had nearly been killed, and the community found its voice. Camila Reyes came out of the house across the street. She had been accepted into nursing school, and the compensation money she received for her testimony and documentation had paid for her tuition. "I saw you walking," Camila said. "I wanted to say hello, and thank you. Because of what you did, I don't have to be afraid anymore. None of us do." "You're the one who recorded everything," Naomi reminded her. "You could have looked the other way, but you were the one who raised your voice. We all did our part." Camila smiled. "That's how change happens, right? Not one hero, but a community saying enough is enough." As they spoke, a patrol car drove by slowly. The young black female officer, whom Naomi didn't recognize, waved friendly. Community policing. Building relationships. Things as they should be. Naomi's mother appeared on the porch 3 houses down and waved to them. She had prepared lemonade and cornbread, the same comforting foods she had planned to serve the day Sloan attacked her daughter. Sitting on Laya's porch, they watched the neighborhood come alive with evening activities. Children playing, families returning from work. Normal life continued where the trauma had occurred, but healing had taken root. "Do you know what I realized?" Laya said softly. "That day watching that cop choke you, I thought I was watching you die, but I was actually watching you become who you were always meant to be, a warrior. The voice of those who cannot speak for themselves." Naomi squeezed her mother's hand. "You raised me to stand up, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, especially then. Your father used to say that when good people advance justice, justice moves slowly but surely. You advanced, baby, and you moved mountains." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Naomi thought about the journey from that dreadful May afternoon to today. Sloan was serving the first year of his 35-year sentence in federal prison. Kessler was in a women's prison, stripped of her power and arrogance. Dixon's empire had collapsed, his wealth distributed to the victims he had exploited. Mercer had his law license revoked, was imprisoned, and his political career was ruined. But more important than individual punishments were the systemic changes. The consent decree pushing for police reform, oversight boards giving real power to communities, the quota system abolished, the culture of corruption replaced, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, with accountability. 37 families received compensation, 73 vehicles were returned, hundreds of terrorized people could now drive in their neighborhoods without fear. It wasn't perfect. No system is perfect, but it was better. It was better in a measurable, documented way. Naomi Caldwell took on a new role as head of a federal task force dedicated to rooting out police corruption. June Park would be on her team. They had already identified 3 more cities with similar patterns: quota systems, tow truck company bribes, harassment of minority communities. The work continued, but tonight she could rest. She could sit on her mother's porch and watch the sunset, feeling the satisfaction of battles won and justice served. Her phone rang one last time. A message from Father Burke. "Tomorrow, a service will be held at the church to honor all who resisted. Your participation is very important to the community." Naomi smiled and replied, "I'll be there. I won't miss it." She put her phone in her pocket and turned to her mother. "Do you remember asking me if I was afraid? You asked if I thought they would somehow be set free, despite all the evidence. I remember. I'm not scared anymore, because we proved it's possible. Justice is hard. It's slow. It requires courage from everyone involved, but it's possible, and it's worth fighting for." Laya raised her lemonade glass. "To justice, and to my daughter who refused to be silenced." June and Camila raised their glasses too. "To justice." As evening fell, they sat together. 4 women whose lives had been intersected by trauma, but who found strength in solidarity. A federal agent, a whistleblower, a witness, and a mother who raised her daughter to stand up against injustice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more cases, more struggles, more systems to dismantle. But tonight, Naomi Caldwell, in the neighborhood where she had nearly died, sitting on her mother's porch, surrounded by people who supported her, she allowed herself to feel hope. Officer Trent Sloan had tried to strangle her to death, yet she had used her last breath to uncover the truth, and that truth had set them all free.